Tonight for our Adoptive Family webinar. We have a lovely guest here tonight we'll be interviewing. My name is Kim King, and I'm one of the Adoptive Family Coordinators here at Lifetime Adoption. Lifetime Adoption is the organization who hosts these informational webinars, question and answer sessions, and hopefully helpful interviews for adoptive families who may already be in the process or who may be just beginning the process and looking to find information and an overview and to find out what to expect. And so that's what we hope to impart to you this evening. If you are new to Lifetime and you do not have a coordinator or a person here that you've been communicating with, please do reach out to us. We're always happy to share more about our program with you and answer your questions. Our phone number is 1-800-923-6784. We are generally in the office for regular inquiries and questions like these Monday through Friday during regular business hours. Also, I encourage you, if you have not already applied with Lifetime, it is free to apply. Our founder, Marty Caldwell, she doesn't want to charge a single penny to find out if we can help you. So I encourage you to apply. There is no obligation with filling out the application. It's a pretty streamlined process, and you usually receive a response within anywhere from 1 to 3 business days typically. The application is found online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. So you can just get to our free application right there from the main website, lifetimeadoption.com. Also, as you're on that website, you'll see links to things like our Twitter and our Facebook and our blog. These are more resources and ways for you to stay in the loop with Lifetime, whether you're a new family or you're already a family within our program. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/open.adoption. If you have some questions before you're ready to really fill out that application, maybe you feel more comfortable emailing us. The general email for new questions is apply, APPLY, at lifetimeadoption.com, and from there the applications department will assign you to a coordinator who will become your main point of contact as you learn more about Lifetime. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Libby, who is preparing for our webinar tonight. Libby Murray, she's one of our other adoption coordinators here at Lifetime. There you are.
Oh, they're used to me. I'm excited to welcome another adoption story this evening. It's been a little while since we had one, and I know how well received they usually are, just because it really helps to hear from someone who has not only been where you are today, whatever phase that may be, but also that it's somebody who is now where you're trying to get. And there's so many questions that everyone has, especially in the beginning. But I also think that as you go through the process of researching adoption, and then as you are taking those steps to actually be in the process of adopting and doing your home study, or even if you're just already waiting, sometimes there's questions that come to mind that you didn't think to ask in the beginning. And so adoption stories, to me, are a great way to help you not only prepare, but also think, oh, I never thought of that, and I should look into that. Or, yeah, you know, I've always wondered the same thing, but I didn't know how to word it to find the right information, or whatever that may be. And so it's really great, plus the encouragement that you can get just by seeing that somebody else has been successful and that they've been through the ups and downs of a, you know, normal, happily ever after adoption story, that you can hear straight from them how they made it through those peaks and valleys, and what they wish they knew or what they want to make sure other parents know as they pursue their child through adoption. So this is great to see so many of you here, and I really want to encourage your participation tonight. So if you have questions while our adoptive mom guest is sharing, I want to hear from you. But I want to introduce Laurie, who is an adoptive mom of 3 children. She has 2 different adoption stories, and we had the pleasure of working with her. I remember seeing her on webinars, I think, even before she began with Lifetime's program, and then certainly she was one of a regular attenders while she was waiting to adopt through Lifetime. And so sometimes we get to know our regular webinar attendees a little bit differently when we see them pop up all the time and participate. And it's really exciting for me to get to have her here on this other side and share her story. So, Laurie, I'm just so grateful you could be here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think, we usually always start here just because it's a good springboard, but because we also have such a mixed audience tonight of parents in all different phases of adoption planning, why don't you share just a little bit of how you and your husband Ryan actually came to adoption in the first place?
Well, it was, I think, on our first date. We met later in life, and both of us had been single all of our lives. And I think it was on our first date where we had a marathon conversation, and he brought it up and said, I really have a heart for adoption. I've always dreamt of adopting from China, and you need to be open to that if this is going to go anywhere. And I was like, oh, yay, because I love kids, and I've always dreamt of adoption too. And so it was just a real natural conversation for us, and we knew that whether we were able to have biological children or not, that adoption would be a way that we built our family as well.
Wow, I love hearing that, because a lot of times we hear that, but it's initiated more from the woman's side, and so it's kind of fresh. And I think it's beautiful to hear that Ryan was the one that initiated that conversation even before your family began.
Yeah.
So then, you looking at this photo here of the 5 of you now, you had your daughter biologically first. She's your oldest, right?
That's right. That's Gianna, and she's 9 years old.
And then you decided to pursue an adoption through China, and so your family grew into 4.
That's right. Gianna was almost 5 when we brought Janessa home, and Janessa was about 20 months old when we adopted her.
Great. And so for the families, I'm most familiar with your story for Jaden because you went through Lifetime for his story. But for the families who are still thinking, well, we feel called to adopt, but I'm not sure yet which direction we want to pursue, what was it that helped you decide how to find Janessa?
I don't know that there was anything that helped us other than we knew that China was where we were going to go for that first adoption. And so when we knew it was the right time and we had peace that it was the right time, we pursued that. And we reached out to a couple friends of ours that had adopted also from China just to find out what their experience was like. And we chose our agency and started the process. And the interesting thing about her adoption is right about when our dossier, which is the equivalent of all your paperwork, made it to China, China kind of changed their rules, and they slowed everything down. They typically had been making adoptions happen in about 9 months. They wanted it to be like a pregnancy, and they were very methodical and businesslike in how their adoptions take place. So all of a sudden, we were expecting a 9-month wait, and it was turning into years and years. So we prayed about it, and our agency was having some real success in placing what would be considered a special needs child or children. And so we opened up our preferences to say, yeah, we are open to certain special needs. And that in itself was a real dilemma ethically for us, because they sent us a questionnaire and saying, will you take this, and will you take this, and no, you won't take this, because in a pregnancy you'll take whatever is given to you. So that was an interesting process, but basically we came up with, we will take special needs that we felt like we could handle at the time, because both of us were working full-time. So we said if it was something that was correctable, then we would be open to it. And so Janessa's adoption was kind of a miracle in itself, but she was born with a cleft lip and palate, and we found out that her orphanage that she was in is actually a United States nonprofit hosts it, and so they hire extra nannies to take care of those babies. So we had medicals and pictures, which is very unusual, from her from the first day she arrived, which was when she was 1 day old at the orphanage. And all of the medicals said that she had an open palate, that they closed her lip, and the miracle in it, we just started praying, Lord, you can heal her. And when we got her here and got her to the Seattle Children's Hospital, her palate was not open, and they said it never had been. And so we just rejoiced because her uvula in the back of her mouth was still in the shape of what would be indicative of a cleft, but we didn't have to have her go through that surgery when she got back. So that's just a miracle story in itself.
That is amazing. And, I think whether it's related to special needs or just even some of the questions parents get asked through their home study process or when they're applying to learn about programs that they could use to complete their adoptions, there are so many questions that people, when they're just pursuing a pregnancy, maybe a more, if you want to say, traditional route for building your family, they don't sit around and talk about these things like most people, unless you've maybe gone through premarital counseling where you had somebody who was really diligent about preparing you for the day someday when you're disciplining your children. I mean, a lot of people don't even talk about what kind of schools do we want to put our kids in, what kind of discipline, are we open to special needs, the race of a child, I mean, everything, the age of a child. And so I think what you just were talking about, going through that together and realizing, okay, so this is interesting, and you just kind of tackle it together.
Right.
I mean, I think what always stood out to me about your family is just your strong faith foundation and the fact that you were really invested in your adoption as a team. I would say those are the two things I know to have been strengths about your family that I would hope that especially if you're pursuing adoption as a couple, that you would be able to talk with each other openly about things and be on the same page. For those people out there who maybe are feeling like, well, gosh, I wish it was my husband or my wife that would bring up adoption because they're not thinking like I am yet. Have you ever run into people like that where they just aren't even sure that they could adopt or that they would, but maybe one or the other wants to and the other's hesitant?
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to talk to several people who, either one person was 100% on board and the other's like, I don't know. And, just been able to share our story. And we're not experts, but we're just real, and we share what we went through and how we would proceed with any decisions that we need to make, which always was first with prayer and seeking the Lord and what God would have us to do. And so we've actually been able to see some of our friends adopt or be waiting. We have some friends that are waiting that are just down the street that we've been able to kind of live with them as they've gone through the home study and everything else.
So then, your family welcomes Janessa, and then you feel called to adopt again. Did you also think about adopting internationally that second time, or how did you process that second calling? How did you know which direction to go?
We did always think we would go back to China, and that's the direction we started going. Once we felt like Janessa had bonded well and was well integrated into our family, when we started the next process, we contacted our agency again and kind of started down that road. And the doors weren't closed to us. We certainly could have gone down that road, but Ryan and I just kept feeling like this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. We just didn't have peace about it. And so we let the agency know that we needed to kind of sit on it for a while. And so it was during that time that we were just really seeking and praying for direction as to what we should do, that we got an email from Lifetime. And I had contacted Lifetime when we were waiting for Janessa. Remember how I said that things had really slowed down? And so our agency at the time had said China has just now started allowing what's called concurrent adoptions, where they had forbidden that before. so we kind of started looking at options that, well, gosh, if this is going to be a years and years wait, then let's adopt in the meantime. And we had reached out for Lifetime, and I had sat in on I believe it was a webinar, and just kind of got some information. And we really couldn't move forward at that time just financially because we had another agency that we'd already contracted with. But I was very impressed with the services and the people that I had talked to, but I hadn't talked with anybody from Lifetime for years, and so that's why we really were like, oh wow, well, God, what are you trying to say to us? And so we had a consult over the phone with Kim, and I don't know if you remember that, Kim, but we talked for a long time. And probably asked a lot of questions, and hopefully none of them were stupid. But we were just trying to gather and trying to decide what what are we supposed to do. And after that, we sat on it again and just prayed some more, and then really felt at peace that was the way we were to go. So it was I don't know. I think it was about a month and a half after we first talked to Kim that we went ahead and contacted Lifetime again and said, "Yep, this is it. We're moving forward."
Yeah. So one of the things that always stands out to me. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say to your comment, Laurie, no matter where a family is in their process when we meet them, and maybe we're having the phone conference because we are considering them seriously for our program, no question is too big or small. And we know that when you're coming from a place of international adoption, it is a switch of gears. There are different factors you're looking at, different concerns, different benefits, between an international adoption and a domestic adoption. So that's totally normal, for you to have questions. But, I really enjoyed our conference and felt like I picked up on how strong your faith was, and I knew that was something that would really make a difference for you as a family in our program, as well as the things that you were looking for in your adoption. And I just picked up on that you guys were really on the ball. You proved that by having already adopted internationally, which is no easy task. But I also knew that this is going to be in God's timing. So it was going to have to be the right time where you guys felt led to move forward.
That's right. Yep.
Well, and I think, too, whether you've adopted twice internationally or twice domestically, or one, having one and then the other, that no two adoption stories, in my experience, are exactly the same, and so it's completely normal to still have a lot of questions, even if you've been through it before.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, I would say that's always the number one tip I give people, is just keep asking questions. But Laurie, I just think too, especially like Kim said, that it's such a different package of questions and preparations and expectations when it comes to domestic versus international adoption. So I think the primary difference I see, especially within our program, is that with international adoption, typically that's more of a closed situation, and then with the birth mothers contacting us, they're usually wanting at least to know the adoptive parents and share information about their family history and those kinds of things. So how did you and Ryan wrap your minds around this concept of open adoption, since you'd already had a closed adoption experience?
I think we're still wrapping our mind around it, but that was something that we had to talk a lot about, and just because our generation growing up, most adoptions were closed, and so the idea of open adoption is fairly new in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and my opinion is it can just be so healthy for that adopted child to have not only their birth parent, to have to know where they come from and some of the history there, but to also see the adoptive parents, the parents that are going to raise them, to have this healthy relationship with that birth parent. And so we just kind of plodded along and didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, because the birth mother can have so much say in what their desire is, and then you have to come to a, are we comfortable with that or not?
So then we did have a great question here, and I wanted to bring this up. It was going to come up eventually. So since it was so clearly on your heart, that first adoption, to pursue an adoption in China, I mean, basically that weeds out especially all the questions about, the race of child, because you know the background of the child when you're pursuing a country. How did you come to decide what you were open to when you decided, okay, now we're going to jump into domestic adoption? Were you specific in searching for a girl or a boy? How did you decide what racial background or what ages to be open to?
Well, we just kind of tried to stick with what we knew. And so originally when we signed on with Lifetime, we asked for a girl. We made it gender specific. And we said up to 20 months because that was how old Janessa was. And, the study that I've done with attachment and stuff, I felt comfortable with, with the lives that we lead and both of us being working, that was, a kind of a top age for us that we felt comfortable to bring into our family. And so we were open to race, and we were up to 20 months, and we asked for a girl. And it was pretty easy for us to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. And so then you adopted a little boy eventually. What came to mind to make you change your preference for a girl?
Well, I just call myself a slow learner, and God always has to work on me in different ways. But we ended up waiting a lot longer than we thought we would, and I think a lot longer than a lot of people at Lifetime thought we would. And so I can't remember how long we were into our time with you guys, but I'm thinking it was around a year that we started talking about it again, just saying, okay, well, we haven't had any good leads. I don't think we had even had any calls about a birth parent or birth mom being interested in us at that point. So we, again, took it to the Lord and felt like we could open that up and just say, okay, if God has a girl for us, whether we say boy or girl, He's going to give us a girl, but we need to be open to if it's a boy. So the reason we said girl is because we knew girls. We've got two, and Ryan is an amazing girl daddy. He's very calm and sweet-spirited, and loves to watch the princess movies with the girls, and is very involved. And doesn't matter whether it's boy stuff or girl stuff. He just is a very involved dad, and so that's why we went with girl at first.
So then, like you were saying, one of the questions I think probably every single adoptive parent or adoptive family asks is, how long can we expect to wait before we bring a child home? And while we have an average on time, especially, and for those of you who may be thinking, yeah, I want to know, and you're starting to type in right now and ask us, what can we expect? Sometimes it can vary depending on what you're searching for, but every story is just so different, and so we have a ballpark, but also that, for instance, when a family says, well, I'm going to be specific to searching for a girl or a boy only, or narrow it to this age range or this racial background, whatever that may be, sometimes that might change the average time that we could tell you to expect. But a family like yours, where you're already you're already touched by adoption, and you have a different, you have a mix of backgrounds in your family already, and then you're open to adopting a child of any race, and then eventually you became open to a boy or a girl. Typically we would think, that kind of criteria, that kind of search is going to present you to more opportunities, so it would just sort of make it as, an assumption that you would be chosen sooner than later. And you continue to wait, and like you said, sometimes it even surprises us when a family is not very specific and they're still waiting, and that's why I do love that we work with families with such strong faith that they can lean on, okay, I've been called to this. I know something is meant to be. There's something in our story we don't see yet, but those are very real times. And I remember even moments with you on webinars where you're listening to other adoptive parents share their stories and just saying, you know, gosh, I needed to hear that, or even just wondering and asking us, like, is there anything else we can do, or what else, you know, should I be thinking about, or whatever that is. How did you and Ryan get through those times when maybe you doubted you were on the right track, or maybe you just wondered if it was ever going to happen?
Well, you know, we were pretty steadfast in knowing that we were called to do this and that this was going to happen. But, you know, as the clock ticks, you do have moments or times that it's more difficult than others. What we chose to do was just remain as active as we could and not put everything in our life on hold, which is hard. You know, you start making vacation plans or things like that. You go, well, gosh, should we go? What if we got the call? And but in the meantime, we had 2 girls here that needed to watch us live this out as well, but we need to make their lives full and rich too. And so we just tried to make our lives as busy as we could, you know, doing normal working parent things. And, you know, there were times that were more difficult than others, but we always knew that we were called to do this. So we didn't question if we were walking down the wrong road.
Mm-hmm. We had a great question here that said, what kinds of things did you end up doing through the wait?
We are Disney fans, so we took a trip to Disney World, which was a first for all of us, which was a huge trip for us. And I think Janessa, our youngest daughter, was 4 or 5 at the time, and we just took a long trip and went, and then we would take, you know, small trips or just, you know, fill our days here on the weekends. We call them family days, and that's what we wrap it around. And I have to say that while we were waiting, I was a lifetime adoptive family lurker, and I would go. I'm sorry, it was my West Coast folks, but I would pull up the West Coast, and I would just kind of look for people, and I would just start praying and for other families, because I knew our story was going to come true, and I wanted other people to have hope too. So we just tried to live our lives as fully as we could while we waited.
It's true. I have a Post-it note that I wrote for myself. Gosh, it's probably almost 2 years now, but I had heard a message on the radio about, you know, the wait is a gift. But when you're waiting, it doesn't often feel like a gift. But when you start to use it in the way that you just described, it really is a gift, like just an opportunity in a sense, to do things that maybe you won't be able to do right away with a newborn at home or with a child that you're trying to welcome into the family. Or, you know, even if you can logistically go, sometimes adding a 3rd mouth to your family makes, you know, the travel budget a little slimmer. And, you know, that there's things to enjoy, but also things that you can do for others while you're waiting to take the focus off of yourself. So I love hearing you say that, Laurie, because I think it's a very natural thing to get into the when's this going to happen and feeling a little discouraged or maybe weary is a better word, while you're waiting to discover that, because that can happen while you're trying to conceive. That can happen even while you're just, you know, you're going to adopt, but maybe you're trying to prepare just through those early steps of getting all the details together, or maybe the funding, or whatever that is. And then I always hear too, you know, even once you become matched with a birth mother or with a child, you still have to wait to bring that child home. So there's always this time of pending that you can make the most of if you're conscious in that and you're honest with yourself about, gosh, this is hard, but what can I do?
Right.
So
I called
it
my land of limbo.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
It's true, especially since, and I loved what we talked about yesterday, Laurie, how comparing now how you feel as a family, as a couple, that you realized, gosh, we don't have to keep our home study updated.
Yes.
Wow. You know, the things that happen once you're on the other side of your goal and realizing, oh, life is a little different now. Now I'm not in limbo anymore. Now I'm just living what I was waiting for. That's awesome. So I want to talk about your son's story too, but I know that part of his story includes an opportunity that actually fell through for you guys, and that I would say it's just interesting to me because part of what's unique about your story, especially in Lifetime's program, is that, you know, on average, most of our adoptions are of newborns from the hospital, but in both opportunities that you had, it was children that were already born. So let's, I guess, talk first about Jaden, your son. How old was he when you found out that his birth mother was interested in pursuing a match with you?
He was born July 15th of last year, and she actually matched with us on August 21st with the day. Our first conversation with her was August 9th, and then she took some time to make her decision. So there was, again, was a different kind of wait. When we didn't know about him, so we didn't have the pregnancy wait time, but once we did know about him and didn't know if we were matched or not, you know, it's just a different kind of wait.
So did it surprise you that she called? I mean, because logistically her baby would have been, what, about 3 weeks old by the time you spoke with her?
Yeah, 3 or 4 weeks, something like that.
What was that like for you? Because you hadn't gone through that experience with Janessa. And probably you were expecting to get a call from a pregnant woman.
Right.
Were there different kind of questions that came up with her?
Well, she had the questions, which was really interesting because she had him prematurely. He was about 6 or 7 weeks early, and she had been working with another adoption agency in Nevada, and when she went into the hospital, communication with them just broke down, and I don't believe she had already picked a family with that other agency, and so it was after he was born that she contacted Lifetime. And I believe that most of the contact with Lifetime was actually through his maternal grandmother. She was the one who had been talking with Diane mostly. So when Diane called and said that she was interested in talking to us, she said, you know, you're probably going to be talking with the grandma. That's who most of my contact has been with, and so just so you're prepared. And so when we called that night, it was actually his birth mom, and she had been very thoughtful in the questions that she had for us. Even though she had obviously very carefully read our profile, she had some very specific questions for us, which made us feel like, wow, she really cares about the choice that she's making. She's not just making a last minute or, oh, I can't take him. She was very thoughtful. And some of the questions were kind of hard to answer. You just go, I'm not sure what she's looking for. But again, we just tried to be really real and really transparent and just say, well, this is who we are, and this is about our family, what you would want to know. So it was, after that conversation, this was the hard part. It was a Friday night, and so we thought, oh, she's going to call right away and talk with Diane on Monday and say how wonderful we were, and she didn't. And she didn't call on Tuesday, and Diane probably is like, oh no, there's another email from Laurie. Going, have you heard anything? And so finally, I think Diane reached out for them, for his birth mom and grandma, and just said, so we understand you had a conversation, what are you thinking? And his birth mom's response was, well, I might want to talk to somebody else. I'm not sure. And we thought it went fine. I just want to make sure. was like, oh, man, that kind of hurt. But we just kept praying and saying, Lord, we know you have a plan, and we were just praying over that little baby because we didn't know what kind of care he was getting. We knew he was at home. He'd been released from the hospital, and so still it was another week before she made her decision and contacted Diane and said she wanted to match with us. So it was a long, almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, which I think is a good reminder because, again, you know, when it comes to open adoption, a lot of people focus more on the amount of contact desired after an adoption, but open adoption really means that she gets a say through the process too, and that does ensure, I wouldn't say ensure, but it increases the chances of her actually continuing to move forward when she feels like she gets to control the pace and the timing. And when it comes to a child that's already born, one of the things we try and make sure she knows is it's never too late. And so she can still take time to decide just as if she was pregnant and just communicate, you know, gosh, I think I need more time. Or, well, I've heard that before. And honestly, I think that I would probably be that type of woman that would think, I really, really liked Ryan and Laurie. I felt like we clicked, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing out on like something different that brings you more peace. And I probably would want to talk with someone else too. Do you know if she ever actually did follow through and speak with someone else, or then did she just decide, no, I'm good with them? Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't.
She
it was just us that she
out.
talked with. Yeah, she just needed some time.
And so then how did that work after she decided, yes, I want to move forward? Did you go out right away to go meet him, or was it another amount of time before you could actually go and hold him?
Yeah, it was. So we started talking about when we would come down there, and she understood that we were just going to make one trip, and that she wanted to meet us beforehand, which we were fine with. We wanted to as well, but that we were just going to make one trip. We weren't going to fly down there for a meeting and then come back down for the adoption. And she was facing, she was in high school, so she was facing going back to school. So she was trying to deal with back to school stuff and adoption stuff all at the same time, which for a high school student, depending on their maturity level, can be a little overwhelming. So we would have these little lags of communication. And so our dilemma was that it was a Wednesday that we matched, and we're like, let's go now. But we had a trip that weekend planned to the beach with my parents. It's an annual trip that we take, and the girls were so looking forward to it, and we hadn't heard much from the birth mother as far as specific dates, and so we just made the decision we're going to go ahead and go on the trip. And then if we need to leave, we'll leave, and Mom and Dad can bring the girls back or whatever. But we just made the decision to continue living our lives until things were ironed out. And it was a really good thing that we did, because there were like 3 days that we just didn't even hear from her. And it was those 3 days that we were at the beach. And finally we were able to iron out kind of a schedule that she wanted us to come on a Saturday. It was the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, and wanted to meet on that Saturday, and then she made an appointment with the adoption agency in Nevada for that Sunday to do all the paperwork and stuff. So it did take a few weeks, about 3-4 weeks from the first conversation we had, but when we look back, it went really quick.
Right, in hindsight, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're plugging through it, it doesn't always feel like that day-to-day sometimes can go in 10 or 12-hour chunks that just feel like, when are we going to know?
Right.
And with him being a preemie, too, I mean, that must have been particularly interesting for her, just knowing that he needed a little extra attention and care while she's also putting this together. I can only imagine what that would have been like for her to just take those steps to actually make it happen. In the meantime, she's still caring for this infant. But
yeah, I remember having conversations with her on the phone where I could hear him, making noises, and I could hear, as she would talk to him and stuff, I could hear the love in her voice. I mean, he was getting good care, and that was just verified for us as when we got him, is that he was growing really quickly and has really made up for lost time. But she loved him very well. That was for sure.
So then, you talked about how young she was. So yesterday you actually shared with me how she lived at home and she had 2 younger brothers. And
Three
so
younger brothers.
Okay, 3. So
yeah.
Her family was very aware that she was creating this adoption plan. Did you have interaction with more than just her and her mother?
Yeah, actually on the day that she was placing him with us, everything in Nevada has to go through an adoption agency, so we were meeting at the agency. She called me and she said, my brothers want to come and meet you. Would that be okay? And I said, absolutely. Do you want me to bring the girls? Because we actually had traveled as a family down there. We brought Ryan's parents with us to watch the girls, you know, as we needed to go out, just the 2 of us. And she said, yes, please, I really want them to meet all of you. And so we met. She had an 11, 8, and 3-year-old brother. And I believe her mom is a single mom. And it wasn't based on financial need, I think, that they were making a placement, because just by the car that was being driven and stuff, it didn't look like they were in dire straits or anything like that. But those boys, it was obvious it was not a warm, fuzzy thing. We were being scrutinized when we were in that room with them. They were checking us out big time to make sure that he was going to a good place.
Oh, wow.
And so then you actually decided to bring your daughters with you to experience this together. And I would say probably since there wasn't a hospital situation involved, it was probably a little easier to juggle them because you weren't having to, keep them out of no children areas and stuff like that. But meanwhile, you have these 2 hopeful sisters that know that you're traveling to go meet this little guy. What was that like for you as a family? I think in those moments of, well, we're going to meet him, but we still, we could still go either way, and just trying to help them understand what was going on to stay excited, but also prepared that, this is why it's taking time and this is how things have to go. What was that like for you as a mom to be looking forward to this little guy, but also knowing that you had 2 little girls who were very aware of the steps you were taking?
Well, gosh, it was hard. I'll say both of us tried to be really delicate with them. And because of the situation that had fallen through for us, like you had mentioned earlier, the girls had already felt that loss because that little boy was a little bit older. That birth mother had us Skyping with him so that he would be familiar with us. So Gianna and Janessa had really attached to that little guy. So when that one fell through, we all grieved it. And so when we presented them with this situation, we were very delicate and, possibly and maybe, and, she really likes us, but we got to understand that this is a baby that she carried, and we need to know that she could change her mind. And we just tried to be really honest with them and let them know what could happen. And another reason we took them with us is we just figured, well, if things don't happen, then we're just going to make it a family trip that we'll still make memories together. So that was kind of our idea behind taking them with.
Gosh, what a healthy way to look at it. That it could still be this positive memory you have of, remember when we went down there and we saw this and we did that? But, obviously, this story turns into, remember when we got our baby brother?
Yep.
And so we had a great question, Laurie. I wanted to ask this because I think there's probably other people who may be curious but unsure to ask. This question came in, what is it like to have such an awesomely diverse family? Does anyone ever say anything about it, or is it ever an issue or topic of discussion that you have to talk about with your kids or in your family? What is that like for you now?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it's something that, you know, even with just Janessa, we have never ever had anybody say anything negative, which I think is such a blessing. When we were presented with this situation, you know, we started talking with Gianna, my 9-year-old. She was asking questions about the birth mom and said, you know, well, what does she look like? And I said, oh, she's beautiful. She's a Filipino, African-American, and she's absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, Gianna kind of sat on that for a second, and then she goes, Mom, I don't know how I feel about having a brother with brown skin. And I said, you know, that's fine. I said, not for sure we will have a very unique-looking family, but let's talk about what family is, and had each of them talk about what makes our family special. And after each of them talked a little, I said, now, did you notice neither of you said anything like, I have blonde hair like my mom, or I have blue eyes like my dad, or I have brown eyes like my mom, because we always find the similarities. You know, so Janessa, you know, Janessa has brown eyes like her mom. And I said, neither of you guys said anything about that. So what makes our family special is the love and the security and the fun that we have together. And I said it won't be any different adding another race to our family. It's going to be our family. And so, you know, we just have always been really open about that, and we live in a fairly diverse area. But one of the really neat things, because Gianna had some, you know, she's 9 years old, and that is valid what she was considering. And it was interesting when we were in the adoption agency and the birth family had just left, and so it was the first time that I was holding Jaden as my son. And, you know, it's a pretty awesome moment, and I'm trying to listen to the social worker, and I still don't remember a word she said, trying to fill out paperwork, and it was like the Lord told me, hand him to Gianna. And literally it was at the moment she held him, she said, you know, it was just the bond took place at that time, and she's just like, oh, baby brother, do-do-do-do-do. But this is what she said. She said, well, baby brother, we sure have a colorful family, but you just made it so much more beautiful. And it was so profound, and I had to stop the social worker because it was a big mommy moment for me, that she gets it. This, you know, it's not about the colors of our skin. It's that we are a family, and we're a beautiful family. It's just like a rainbow. It's not any one color in the rainbow that makes it beautiful. It's all the colors together that make it so unique and beautiful.
I hope you wrote that down so that someday you don't forget that story.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, isn't it?
And so this continued to move forward. Now, what, because you did create an open adoption plan, so what does that look like for your family? What kinds of things did you talk about with Jaden's birth mother before the adoption happened, and then what does the open adoption look like now?
Well, when we were in Nevada, she wanted weekly contact. She wanted a blog. She wanted videos, and, you know, just pretty much everything. And was very concerned that it wasn't written out in the adoption paperwork. So we just said, you know, why don't you write down what it is that you're wanting, and you know, let us look at it and see how comfortable we are with it. And so she did, and we looked it over, and we felt fine that if that is how she wanted to proceed, we would be willing to do that. And so we both had copies of that, and when we came home, I was emailing her weekly, and sure enough, sending pictures. And, you know, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can say what a 7-week-old is doing new after a week, but and you know, at first she would respond right away, and then it just started, her communication started waning off a little bit. So right now, as it stands, we communicate about once a month, and I believe that she is opening our email and pictures as she's ready to. She's still walking the path of healing, but she sends us, you know, really wonderful notes like, this last month, she said in part of her message was, he's just the most beautiful baby, and such an angel, and every time I look at him, it gives me the drive to make something great of myself. Or she'll comment about how happy he's in our family, and how we're all just an extended family now, and that's how we feel too.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I love
pretty
that she
special.
Share that with you. Well, and you told me too recently that sometimes it's not just about this little boy you're talking about. I mean, she's going through milestones that she's including you into. I think you were telling me that she was recently going prom dress shopping.
Right. Yeah, we always want to check in with her, and just she's getting ready to graduate from high school, which is a big deal, and she's got aspirations for college, and so we just always ask how is it going, and have you decided on what you're going to do after graduation, and did you get to go to prom? And so she did. She said, well, I'm getting ready to go prom shopping, and these are the colors I'm looking at. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you and the girls some pictures and have you vote on which dress I should get, or something like that, which I thought was really sweet.
That's neat.
Mm-hmm. So you have a friendship with her, and I think what's key is that you weren't totally set on how it had to go before you entered into an open adoption, but you were open to discussing it, open to questions, and then as you've seen it, like it changes a little bit once the adoption happens, and sometimes, I would say always, the communication usually gets a little bit more comfortable when you just keep an open heart to it, because you get to know her a little bit more, she gets to know you more, especially I think a lot of that will change after adoption, because that sort of crisis mode goes away, and everyone thinks differently when things stabilize.
Right, that's right.
So it's not that she's forgotten him, it's also not that she's sitting around, burying her head in her pillow every night just in despair, that she's finding goals, and I loved when you told us that she just uses him as motivation to make something great of herself, because that's really what we also try and encourage for these mothers when they choose adoption, is that we know it's not just about this child's future, it's about her own future, and we want her to keep going forward. Where do you see yourself? What do you want for your own life? And what a great model for Jaden to someday look and see that he had not only this family in you to set this example, but also that he can look at where he started and see, that his life inspired her to do great things. And I mean, I can't imagine what kind of impact that would make on a young man,
Right. Right.
And so let's see, we had some other questions. Now, this was a good question, and I thought I was going to bring it up too, because we did get the question about, since he was already born, he probably had a name, and did you get to change his name, or did you keep his name?
That's a great question. I shared this a little bit with Libby yesterday, but yes, we changed his name, and he had a different name, and she had given him a very ethnic name with 3 middle names that were names I had never heard before, and we changed it, and it had never come up until I had sent her a picture that had his name in the name of the picture. And she texted me out of the blue and just said, did you change his name? Well, yes, we changed his name, and we chose Jaden because it means God has heard, and we felt like that was a great culmination of, years of waiting, and that God will hear Jaden's prayers as he grows. And she said, well, I picked these names for these reasons, and I had asked that you keep his name. And, it was like, whoa, that was the first we had heard of it. And so, Ryan and I were, it was kind of like out of left field. So we took a moment and we prayed, because we're like, Lord, help us to respond, because, this was just only a few weeks after we'd returned home, and, we knew she was grieving, and we didn't want to make it worse for her. And so we finally just responded back and just said, we didn't have that conversation, and we had several phone conversations, and we met a few times in Nevada, and it never came up. So how would we have known that this was your desire? And she was sure she had put it in the paperwork, and I looked over all my paperwork again, and I emailed Diane and said, did you? None of us had any of that. So the only thing that we could come up with was that maybe she had filled it out in the paperwork that she had turned in for the first agency that she was working with. But she's never brought it up again to us, and we just try to be really sensitive, and I typically don't use his name when I communicate. I just call him, big buddy, or our baby, or little guy, or, just, refer to him in cute baby terms, and because I don't want to rub salt in the wound. I mean, his name has changed, and it's legal, and that's going to be his name, but I don't want her to hurt over that as well.
Well, and I think, but even just having had that conversation, that's part of his story, and that he will know that he started out with a different name and the reasons behind that, because she was also thoughtful in that.
Right. Well, and I got an adoption book for his baby book, and there's a whole birth family section that I sent to her, and part of it is, when you were born, this is the name you were given, and this is why. And so, if she decides to fill it out and return it, which we haven't seen back yet, but she said she would, then he'll have that in writing from her that says, this is why I chose this name for you.
Mm-hmm. And so we had another question here that just said, you mentioned briefly having gone through a failed adoption match before. Any tips for somebody who has walked through that or is worried about walking through that?
Matthew West, who is a Christian singer, came out with a song, and it was very timely because it was the weekend. The first time I heard it was the weekend after the fall through, and it's called Forgiveness. And so for us, we had to make a conscious effort, and it's not easy, but even if you just say, I choose to forgive, I choose to forgive, I choose to forgive, because in our situation, it wasn't the birth mother that changed her mind. It was a grandparent that filed for custody the day before we were to fly to get him. So there was all this turmoil and drama involved. It wasn't as simple as a birth mother saying, oh, I really just decided I'm going to parent. And so we had to, make this conscious effort and decision to forgive. And we did. And we pray for that little boy all the time as a family. My parents, Ryan's parents, we know that there's a reason that we got to know him. And if that's just for us to be praying for him for the rest of his life, that's what it'll be. So we just had to come to terms with that and be okay with that. And so then in hindsight, you go, as painful as that was to walk through, if we hadn't walked through it, we wouldn't have Jaden. Mm-hmm. And, Jaden is this perfect match for our family, and we are just madly in love with him. So, and I'm pretty sure if I don't intervene, he will never walk or talk because of his sisters.
Yes. That's funny. That is so true with older, I think particularly older sisters. They usually do a lot of translating. Mm-hmm. So then the younger ones, they just figure, well, why do I need to say it? They get me what I want whenever I need it.
Exactly.
Going back to the fact that you do have, adoption's such a huge part of your family, and you're so open about it as a family. Are there questions that still come up now that there's been this birth mother experience where that wasn't, say, in Janessa's story? How do you navigate the different types of stories that you have and really emphasize more on just how it's unique to them and that it doesn't make their story better or so different or, or as if they're missing out on something in their uniqueness? How do you talk about adoption in your family now that you have such two different stories?
We just always have talked very openly about adoption. And sure, after we were in Nevada, there were a lot of questions from Janessa that hadn't come up before, where she would ask me like, well, Mommy, when you met my first mom, what did she look like? Or why couldn't she keep me? Or things like that. And I just have to explain that in China it's very different, and I didn't get an opportunity to meet her first mom, and but she must have been beautiful and very smart to have had such a wonderful little girl. But we do know that she wanted to make sure you were taken care of, because she took you to a place where you were really well loved until we could get to you. And we just kind of give her pieces as age appropriate. And it's just, I think in the future, maybe it'll even be easier just to have such opposite adoption stories, because then there won't be a comparison. Like if they both came from birth mothers that wanted open adoptions, and one birth mother just moved on with her life and very rarely had contact, and the other birth mother, had visits once a year, and that would probably be a little bit harder to reconcile than having that's not an option in her case. So
did having experience with adoption already, was that any part of Jaden's birth mother's decision to find peace in choosing your family? Did you talk about her story with her before he moved forward with his adoption?
We tried to ask her, what about our family drew you to us, and when you looked at our profile, and she never really answered, other than, you guys look really happy, and that was about it. And
we look really happy.
We are happy. But we know that as she was asking questions about us, that first conversation, that a strong Christian faith was very important to her. And so I don't know that as she got to know us, if that wasn't kind of the hook, that she was like, okay, well, this is the right family because this is what I wanted for him. But we didn't get to ask specifically, well, was it because we had an adoption already that really cued you into our family, or what? We didn't get to have that answered.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's true. I think probably there's a natural tendency, especially after you've waited so long, knowing that the process is depending on a woman choosing you to move forward, and that there's only so much you can do to really put yourself out there and get chosen, that it's very normal, I think, to just be so curious, like, how did it finally come together? Like, what was it? But that a lot of times it is, well, there was just something about you. Or you just seemed really happy. And it's not that all the other families didn't seem happy, but there was something about your family that just connected with her enough to get her to talk with you. And then I think being open enough and willing to talk with her is probably what she stewed on all those days that you were waiting to find out what's the next step going to be. That anyone who I would say, if you're in our audience and you have these concerns or these hesitations about, well, I just really would prefer a closed adoption, I would prefer to know nothing, you have to think about the benefits of, just like Laurie was talking about, that you get elements to your child's story because you get to know this woman, but also that she's going to move forward. And then I think how rewarding is it to get these responses back from her, even just, you've only had him in your family for a few months, really, but to hear back from her already and just know that she loves knowing how he's doing, but that she's got these other things going on in her life, and the goals that she's setting, or just the motivation that he gives her. But also I would say you're probably a role model to her too. That
yeah,
it's,
I feel like
it's more than just a child.
Yeah, I feel like I'm playing like the Auntie Laurie role, and because I have some adult nieces that I just kind of get to have this really awesome relationship with them, and I almost feel like I have that with her as well, where I'm going to get to be, I don't want to say a mentor, but a cheerleader for her, and to help encourage her as she walks through different stages of her life. I don't know what kind of a parental figure she's got at home. So.
I like that idea, a cheerleader for your child's birth mother.
Yeah.
Because that's so true, you know, that a lot of times, and under her circumstances, it was great that she had family surrounding her, and that probably either way she could have made it work, but she was choosing a life for him and choosing a life for herself, and that she had these people around her also that have probably continued to help her focus on what's next in her life and how to move forward. But that a lot of these women that we work with don't always have that kind of network, and that sometimes it is the adoptive parents that are the biggest cheerleaders for her future.
Right.
So I love hearing you say that, because I can tell how much you care about her because of the love you have for your son.
Yep, we do. That's for sure.
Do you have any, you know, final things on your heart, or anything that you want to make sure that other families just know from your story, or to know maybe to implement or to use in their own? Is there anything you want to add tonight, Laurie?
Well, gosh, I just, you know, as I was preparing for this and so looking forward to just getting to share our story, I remember sitting and listening and just going, I can't wait to hear what my story is going to sound like, because, you know, like you said, every adoption story is very different, no two are alike. And the word that just kept coming back to me is hope. Don't give up hope. You know, you're in this for a reason. You've been called to do it. You are committed to do it. And don't give up hope. Don't get woe is me. Find a way to do good while you're waiting, because when it is your turn, it could go really fast. It could go really slow. It was really slow until it went fast for us. And, you know, our whole process was 2.5, 3 years. And that was a long time. But it was the perfect time. And, you know, they say God's timing is always perfect. And it's true. And it doesn't mean we're not going to walk through things that are hard. You know, we had heartache. We had a lot of tears and a lot of pain. And but it helped prepare us to be even better parents to Jaden and to our girls. So that's it. Don't give up hope.
That.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that applies. I think that applies to anyone. You know, whether you've already begun with Lifetime and you're currently on the call thinking, yep, that's exactly where I'm at, and needed to hear that. But also for the people who are just, sometimes it's scary at the beginning to think, is this actually going to happen if I take this leap and begin the process? And like you said, I just love the way you put it. If you're called to this, just you keep going. And there's always going to be something you're waiting for, whether it's approval from the home study provider, or to be chosen by a birth mother, or to hear back from her about how she felt about the phone call, whatever it may be. Find something good to do in that wait. And I'm so grateful for your perspective and your light heart. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks, Libby, for having me. I really have appreciated it.
Kim, is there?
Thank
I know
you for sharing
Kim
all the
has
great
been
photos too.
Yes, we love them. Kim has been busily, I don't even know if that's a word, typing with some of our attendees in the background too with some of their questions. So I'm grateful for that, and that a lot of you have been getting some additional information about your own adoption possibilities through Lifetime on tonight's webinar while you listen to Laurie's story. But Kim, is there anything you want to add, or anything that came to mind as we were wrapping up tonight?
I think just to encourage families, if you haven't reached out to us personally and made a connection with someone here at Lifetime who can start walking you through the process and answering questions and kind of just be your go-to person, I would encourage you to take that step and reach out. You know, we might just be a light on your path for a short period of time, or we might find that we're a great team to work together towards your adoption and be in it for the long haul all the way through your successful adoption, like in Laurie's case. Either way, we're just happy to be here for you, and we want to help lighten that load that you might be carrying with all the questions and uncertainty. So feel free to reach out to us. The number to call is 1-800-923-6784. Our Facebook is facebook.com/openadoption. I encourage you to take part in that, even if you're just a lurker, or if you offer your own questions and insight and advice, maybe if you've adopted before. It's a great community on our Facebook page, and we're always finding new things to share and new tips that you could apply to your own adoption process. And of course, the application is free online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. So I encourage you to take that step tonight. If you are filling it out tonight, we will be able to process that first thing in the morning, and then you can expect a response usually within 1 to 3 business days, and you are always welcome to call and check on the status at any time. And also the email, if you just have some questions, and you don't know someone here at Lifetime already, a good email to start out with is apply, A-P-P-L-Y, at lifetimeadoption.com, and our applications department will find a coordinator to start helping you. So I hope everyone has enjoyed our webinar tonight. I know I certainly have, and we thank you all for taking the time to be with us here tonight, and thank you again to our lovely guest, Laurie.
Great. Well, we'll wrap up tonight, and you can watch your email for the next webinar we'll have in a couple weeks, where we'll just have an open Q&A opportunity to talk about all the adoption questions on your mind, and we will answer as many as we can and continue to offer the tips and resources you need to take the next step in your own adoption story. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will talk with you again soon. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.